Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Treasure Hunter from Queen Games and designer Richard Garfield. Now, where do you know that name from? Of course, the designer of Flux. Okay, not that. Magic the Gathering, a slightly better, much better game than that. And of course, Richard Garfield has done a number of other things, although that is the thing he is most known for. But he's done Robo Rally and King of Tokyo and King of New York, which have gained widespread acclaim. And so, of course, Queen went after him because that name has a cachet to it, a pedigree to it. And I also noticed, as I was about to do this review, that I don't own very many Queen games. In fact, I think I only own one other, at least big box game from them, and that's Lost Legends, which coincidentally is another hardcore drafting game. That's what Treasure Hunter is. You are drafting a team of cards that represent adventurers through different, they look like video game levels. There's the ice level, the fire level, the jungle level, and you're trying to gain treasure from these areas. You play cards that have a bunch of strength on them. The highest strength set of cards you play for an area enables you to grab the maximum treasure, which could be a lot of points or some sort of scroll that gives you special point spread at the end of the game or at the end of the round. Or if you play the lowest point spread of adventurers during a round for a certain level, you take the minimum treasure, which might be as good or better than the other treasure. That's the quirk of the game. At the same time, you might just find some coins laying around, and there are goblins who are trying to steal your stuff in the middle of the night, like Golden Axe, and you'll need some dogs to chase them away. Every good adventurer has some dogs around. Let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played, because you probably have no idea what I'm talking about at this point. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Treasure Hunter. This is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players. The goal of the game is to have the most points by the end of the game. The game is going to end after 5 rounds of play. In this game, points are money and money are points. They're sort of interchangeable. Anytime you see a value on any of the treasure tiles in the game that's by itself, that is going to be points. And anytime you see the coin symbol, that is actually coins, which will count for points at the end of the game. The distinction here is that coins can be taken away from you, but the value of treasure cannot be taken away from you, but at the end, they count for the same thing. At the start of the game, each player is going to get 15 coins worth of coins. They come in 3s, 2s, and 1s. Everyone gets 9 cards randomly from the same main deck of cards. You're going to lay the game board out in the center of the table. Now, it's made up of 2 pieces, and actually on the other side of this board is a scoring track, which you only use at the end of the game. So the majority of the game, you're going to be looking at this side. And on this side, you have the different types of adventuring levels, the snowfield, the jungle, and the lava cave. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take all the treasure tokens in the game, shuffle them up, make 2 equal stacks of them, and then at the start of every round, including the first round, you're going to put out 3 brand new treasure tiles on each side of the board from each of those stacks, in all the min sides and all the max sides. You're going to do the same thing with the goblin tiles. You're going to shuffle them up, keep them face down with the skulls and the 1 coin piece on this side, and then randomly put 3 of them out in a row in each of the applicable spots. This is the round marker here, and it will show you on this side, this is a card drafting game, so when you go from round to round, this indicates that you'll be drafting in the other direction. So the first round, it's going to be clockwise and counterclockwise, and so on. These tokens are actually just for scoring. When we flip over to the scoring side, every player is going to choose a color. They'll put 1 color in front of themselves, and the other color they'll put on the scoreboard, so everyone remembers what color they are. I think it's kind of obvious, but that's okay. And yes, there are other tokens for gold as well. If you find that you have mounds of gold in front of you, or you're actually running out of money, which might, I guess, happen in a 6-player game at some point, you can use the 10 and the 20 chips with the gems on them in order just to indicate more gold that you have. So let me give you a quick rundown of how the game rounds are going to work, and then we're going to circle back and I'll actually explain all of the individual components. The first phase of every round of the game is assembling your hand. Like I said, at the start of the game, you're going to get 9 cards dealt out to you. One player will be the dealer for the round, and that will pass every round as well. Someone will be the new dealer. So you'll have 9 cards, and then you're going to draft those cards, which is just a very simple draft. You're going to take one card of your 9, put it face down in front of you, pass the other cards to either your left or your right, depending on what round it is, and you're going to keep doing this until you have drafted 9 cards. So there's no tricks or turns to this one. You're not going to get rid of a card or do anything like that. It's just drafting 9 cards. The second phase of each round is playing your cards, and that's broken down into 3 different phases individually, or as part of this main phase. The first is collecting treasure, and when you want to collect treasure, you look at the board, and you're going to go down from the snowy mountains to the jungle to the lava caves, one after the other. So first you'll say, okay, we're in the snowy mountains, or whatever its proper name is. Everyone must play all of the blue adventurers that they have. So in my hand here, I happen to have 4 blue adventuring cards. I must play all of them out. You do not have a choice in that matter. You may have action cards, but you don't have to play the action cards unless you want to influence the outcome. So let's see, I have this set up for a 3-player game. So, wow, okay, there's a lot of blue that happened to be out, even though I did shuffle this up. All right. So at that point, once everyone has played all of their adventurers, you're going to add up the totals on all of their cards. Whoever has the highest total, and once you've figured out all the sums, then people have a chance to respond with action cards. If someone chooses to use an action card, then whatever it might be, then everyone else has a chance to respond based on the card that has been played, because if it influences the outcome. So let's see here. This player actually does happen to have like a card that would give him +8 to his sum, so that might bump someone up or back or whatever it might be. So then everyone else in clockwise order had a chance to respond, and again until everyone is done playing cards. At that point, when you add up all the sums, whoever has the highest total strength is going to take the one that is the max treasure tile, and they're going to put that in front of them. Whoever has the absolute lowest is going to take the minimum tile, and whoever is stuck in the middle gets nothing. And then you keep your cards in front of you just in case, because some other cards might reference it in a little bit. But then you go down to the jungle and do it again, this time with the green jungle warrior cards that you may have. If you have any of those cards, you need to put those face up in front of you. And you'll do the same thing. Figure out who has the most. They're going to claim the max, or whoever has the least is going to get the minimum. And you can play action cards in order to have some sort of influence on the outcome. Once you have done this for all 3 combat levels, then you move on to the next part of this main phase, which is chasing away the goblins. The goblins are going to try and steal your precious coins from you. In order to chase them away, you need dog cards. So you'll play any dog cards that you have in your hand and add up their total paw strength. If their paw strength is equal to or greater than all of the goblins, you'll check against each of them. So there's 2 1-strength goblins and a 3-strength here. As long as you had at least 3 total strength worth of dogs, you would not be affected by anything. But let's say that someone played only strength of 2 card. That means that these 2 goblins would be chased away, but this goblin, for that individual player, you're doing this individually, but this goblin that has a strength of 3 is going to affect this player. And what happens if you're affected by each of the goblin tiles is that you lose that much gold. They steal it. Well, not just lose it, you actually have to put whatever gold they've stolen onto those goblin tiles. So in this case, it'd be 1. If I had no dog cards whatsoever, I might have to lose a lot more than that. Each of the goblins would steal from me. Then, to add insult to injury, whichever player did play the most total strength of dog cards would get to take all of the goblin tiles and all of the money that those goblins collected. They'll take these tiles, flip them over, and the one on the back indicates that each of the goblin tiles individually is worth 1 coin at the end of the game, plus whatever coins you were able to take from the other players. The next part of the playing cards phase, the last part of that phase, is playing coin cards. You have the opportunity to play cards that have a value of 1, 2, or 3 on them. You play as many of them as you have, and you will collect that many coins from the bank. The The last main phase of the round involves using your yellow scroll tiles. If you've captured yellow scroll treasure tiles, you can use those at the end of a round. I'll get back to that and explain that in a minute. But other than that, you just do a reset. Recollect all of the cards that everyone played during the round, put them all back into a deck, give them to the new dealer. The new dealer is going to shuffle them up, and at the same time, someone is going to put out brand new goblins and brand new treasure tiles from the top of each of the stacks. You'll move the round marker up as well, and now you have to draft in the opposite direction. All right, so that's a grand sweeping overview of how the game works. Now let's take it back a bit and take a look at the individual cards and what they are in the game. So as far as the adventurer cards go, there are 3 different suits of cards: red, green, and blue. But each of them has the same amount of denominations. There's 1 through 12 for each different suit. In fact, they even have the same character depicted on them. It's just that the borders in the background are different. So there's the 1... and they have names, too, which really wasn't going above and beyond the Call of Duty when you consider the fact that this is not really that thematic a game. But I appreciated it, and that absolutely does not look like any famous video game character. How dare you? But the art in this game, I'll say right now, is really good, so I thought it was worth showing off. And it is an interesting little detail that they added to the game to give them some personality. Now, one thing I didn't really go into detail at all yet are the action cards. The action cards can straight up influence the sum that you have of adventurer cards, or it can have some other wacky effects. So here's a very simple one. The Flaming Swords, you play this on any of the different adventuring areas, and you get a straight up +4. The Shrinking Potion gives you a -2. And you might say, well, why would you do that? Bear in mind, the distribution of treasures that come out in the minimum and maximum spaces is random, which means that the good stuff might be in the minimum spot, which means you may want to tank it and you may want to be last. But this is where I'll also mention an important note. In order to take any treasure in a round, you have to at least be on the board. If you played no cards, or if the sum total of your cards for one of the adventuring sites is 0 or less than 0, it could go into the negatives, you get nothing. You have to at least have 1 point of strength on the adventuring board that you're going after. But the Shrinking Potion can still be very, very useful if you just need to get a little bit lower than the other players to get the minimum treasure for that board. Then you have different animal companions. There's one for each color. This will double all of your colored cards, the sum of your strength for that particular color that it's keyed into: the dragon, the tiger, and the bear. And remember that these are not colored cards, meaning you do not have to play these cards or any of the other action cards that I'm showing you. You are only forced to play the colored adventurer cards. Everything else is optional. Goblin Mercenaries. If you play Goblin Mercenaries, you get +8 to your sum for one of the adventuring sites. However, you have to put a coin on every one of the goblins. I know it has a picture of a 3 coin here, but that doesn't mean you put a 3 coin on every goblin. It just means you put 1 on every goblin. But hey, if you kill the goblins, you get it back. Sleeping Beauty cancels one of the adventuring cards that you played, that you're forced to play this round, which could be really huge if you are trying to not win the max or you want to win the minimum. Scare Goblin scares away all of the goblins, and you won't be stolen from by them for this turn. But if you don't play dogs, you're not going to be able to take them either. And then the Mystery Mule. You play the Mystery Mule, and you essentially just take the top card off of the main stack of cards and hope for the best. If you're in the middle of the adventuring phase, if you draw the color of the site that you're at, so let's say you choose to play this in response during the blue adventure, you must play any blue adventurers that you draw from playing the Mystery Mules. One other note on the dogs. The dogs have a ranking on the bottom because dogs have a hierarchy too, I guess. And what that means is that if there's a tie for players who would be able to claim all the goblin tiles, it's whoever played, it's not just, if no one has a clear majority of strength and there's a tie, it's whoever played the highest ranked dog card. So in this case, a 10 would be a higher than 5, then this person would get it. And finally, let's go into a little more detail on the treasure tiles themselves. So most of the treasure tiles look like this. They are just positive numbers, and they're just this random gear that gets you these amount of points at the end of the game, added together with all of your money. They come in a wide variety. They go from like, I think there's one. There's like a 1, 2, or 3, and there's a 3, and then they go up to like 20, which is the highest. There's also the Infinity Gauntlet, which I think would kind of be the thing you'd want to get, but whatever. There's also negative treasures that you don't want to get. They are straight up negative points. Then there's the yellow scrolls. Now, the yellow scrolls have the potential to give you a lot of points, but only selectively, and you must choose to use them at the end of a round. If you don't use them by the end of the 5th round, you don't get anything for them unless you have some special ability going on. And in fact, during the 5th round, if any of these tiles come out during the round, you have to dump them and put new ones out. In other words, these can never be randomly put out on the board during the last round. So there's different types here, and they all come in different varieties. So this one here says that if you choose to use it at the end of a round, for every blue adventurer you played that round, you get 3 coins. And of course, these come for different colors of cards or in different denominations. So for instance, there might be one that says for every red adventurer you get 1 coin, and so on. This has to do with the coin cards. This comes in ones, times 1s, and times 2s. And that's in the times 1 says that for whatever amount of money you gain from playing coin cards for this round, let's say 8, you get that again. So if I played a times 1 card, I'd get a total of 16. This is the times 2, which means that I get a total of 24 coins. I know that's confusing, but just you're double. Essentially, it's just like you have the 8 coins in this example that I gained from playing coin cards. Then I get it again, then I get it again, is what that means. It comes in times 1 and times 2. It's not really times, though. That's the confusing part, but whatever. This one gives you a bonus depending on the denominations of cards that you played, regardless of the color. In this case, it's 10, 11, and 12, but you might also see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So for every 10, 11, or 12 that I played this round, I get 3 coins. Now, the gray scrolls are only for endgame scoring. You'll hold on to them until the end and get certain scoring. So this one says you get 2 coins for every treasure token, including this one that you've gained, or any yellows that you held on to and didn't use. Because if you use a yellow, it's removed from the game. And this one gives you 2 coins for every goblin tile you collected at the end of the game. And that's pretty much it. That's Treasure Hunter. It's a drafting game. You're drafting adventurers to get as much treasure as you can, wanting to get either the maximum or the minimum, depending on the circumstance and what treasure is out there, and trying to chase away goblins and play coin cards, all of these different things. Whoever has, well, I'll show you this too. Once you're done with all that, boom, there's a very not that impressive looking scoring track, but nevertheless, there it is. You will keep track of your score, and whoever has the most points is the winner of the game. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, first and foremost, the game looks fantastic. I love the artwork that they picked for this. All the adventurers, the aesthetics on the boards, and I mean, everything just looks fantastic. Even the treasure tokens. They did a great job with that. And I might dare say, as far as the physical components themselves, I don't say this often, this might be a tiny bit overproduced, only because, mechanically, this is a very simple card drafting game. There's a lot of quirks and some surprising depth to it. We'll get to that in a second. But still, it's a card drafting game, so a lot of the things that you see out there, like the treasure tokens, like the goblins, could just be little Euro cards. But I do appreciate that they went above and beyond for that. Maybe it kicks it into a higher price bracket, which might be a bummer, but the game does look fantastic overall, and I think maybe that's the Richard Garfield influence again. They really wanted to go above and beyond for it, and they did. It looks great as far as the physical presentation. Moving on to the mechanisms. I really like card drafting. If I had to pick like my favorite mechanisms, and maybe one day I'll do a list for that, I think that card drafting would be in my top 5. It is that enjoyable because it's simple, but it has the potential to give a lot of depth to it. And it's something that could be its own game, which is the case of, for the most part, Treasure Hunter and Lost Legends, which I mentioned before, and smaller filler games like Fairy Tail and Sushi Go, or it could just be a part of a bigger whole. I think that Treasure Hunter does the best that it can at keeping it the core focus of the game, but giving enough ancillary depth and stuff to it to make it feel like a bigger board game. And a lot of that also has to do with the physical components as well. But my main point here is that I really enjoyed this game, and I enjoyed it more than I thought that I would. I don't think that it reinvents the wheel by any means, but the little tricks that it has there, together with the small thematic elements, do let it rise above other card drafting games in the same weight class. The main thing is the whole aspect with the min and max treasures and how you can go for the lowest or the highest, which also gives it almost a trick-taking feel to it as well. Some quirky, quick trick-taking games have similar aspects to it, but the idea that you are trying to play, normally you just be like, play as strongest cards that you possibly can. But in this case, first off, you're forced to play your adventurers. You must play every colored adventurer for the level that you're currently going through with the other players. And which means that the draft is all important for trying to, in some cases, keep the weakest card or the strongest cards out of your hand because you want the minimum treasure. And it's all like this tension and like this game of chicken of like, who's going to have to take these really high cards when everyone knows they don't want them? Do you take a lesser card at this point and do the math and make sure that a higher blue card that you don't want may end up with another player? There's a lot of really tense decisions when it comes to that, because when it comes to the adventuring section, sometimes you just have to make sure that you get the minimum card as much as possible, and sometimes where none of your options are good, where you know you can't get the maximum treasure, but you don't want to get stuck with the minimum treasure because it's negative or whatever it might be, sometimes you might do your best to stay right in the middle if you can. By the way, since we kind of touched on that, I think that this game actually, despite the fact that it goes up to 6 players, less is probably better. I did not play it with 2 players, which has some weird rules to it as far as like how you draft. Otherwise, it's the same game. But I have played it with 3 players and 5 players, and I think I enjoyed a 3-player game more than a 5-player game. And I think that 6 would be overkill. I think 6 would be like way too much going on and trying to keep track of what the other people are doing. So I actually think maybe 3 or 4 is perfect for this, but I digress a little bit. I do just enjoy that whole min-maxing, which is a weird way to use that phrase, aspect of the game and how you want to go for those treasures. It makes the draft so much more interesting, especially when you throw in those special action cards, which, if this were not a drafting game, I would hate all of this because it would mean that the game is too random, too chaotic, too take-that-y. But because it's a draft, because you see almost all of the cards except for the ones that people draft for their first pull, because you see all of these, it's your choice to pass them up and leave them for someone else to hit you to use on their team of adventurers, the Shrinking Potion or the Goblin Mercenaries, whatever it might be. So it's making the best of the situation. The allotment of cards you get may be random, but what do you do with that? And that's the core thing I like about drafting, and it's on full display here. Other elements of the game just flesh this idea out more with the whole goblins and how they, it really does feel like Golden Axe, but how they can steal your coins, but you can go ahead and draft dogs if you want. By drafting those dogs, you might be putting yourself in a worse position for the adventuring and getting the treasures, but you don't want to get your coins stolen, and you also might want to go for stealing all the goblins. By the way, taking all of the dogs that you can in a round is a perfectly viable strategy to try and make sure the other players not only get stolen from, but then you will take all the goblin tiles, each one worth a point, and the coins that are potentially stolen from the other players. Really interesting aspect there. Going for the goal, just playing coins is a viable option, but there's really not a lot of coin cards, which makes the yellow scrolls for those coins not that great. But other yellow scrolls could potentially be very useful, and planning out when to use them adds another layer to the game, because it's like, okay, I played 2 red heroes now. I could play this card that gives me coins for each one, but I've only played 2. Might I do better in another round? Who knows? You might not. So that's an interesting sort of push your luck aspect to the game. And it's interesting. I mean, again, I'm not going to say this is the greatest game ever, only because it doesn't do anything drastically new. And people are going to be like, oh, another card drafting game. But if you like card drafting games like I do, and you like games that look good and have some quirks to them, or even if you like trick-taking games because of some of the aspects of this game that feel like those types of games, definitely give this one a look. I was surprised. I was really surprised. I think this is another very, very solid game from Richard Garfield. The guy knows his stuff, and maybe I should check out more Queen Games at this point. That is Treasure Hunter from Queen Games. Very, very cool game. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.